We're in section 9.1. We're going to shift gears a little bit in chapters 9 and 10 and deal a little bit, kind of dabble into some geometry. Okay, so I know geometry is like, kind of, but really geometry is measurements, it's shapes. And we're looking at circumference and area. We're focusing on circles in chapter 9. And then in chapter 10, we'll look at some other figures. Okay, so we shouldn't be talking. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and start filling in some notes. All right, we're going to start off with some terms and definitions. Just a basic circle. All right, if you'd like to draw one, you can. We're going to go through some of these definitions. A circle is a set of all points in a plane. So actually, points are what make up the line that forms a circle. The radius is half the distance from the center. All right, so we've got the center, and then we have the radius that's half the distance from the center to any point on the circle. That's the radius. All right, then we have the diameter. The diameter is the full distance. Oops. The full distance across the circle. That's what we call the diameter. All right, and then we have some formulas for circumference. We're going to be referring to these in all of the examples today. The formula for circumference, what do you see that might be the difference between the two formulas? Theoretically, both of them would get to the same answer. So why in the world would I have two formulas to find circumference if both of them would produce the same answer? What do you see that's different between one and the other? Joel?
If they don't give you the diameter, you can, in C equals 2 times pi times, 2 times pi times radius, because radius doubled is the diameter.
Yep.
It would calculate it automatically, and if they give you the radius, you just do C.
Yeah. All right, you following what he's saying? Okay, so the radius is half the diameter, so that's why you can multiply it by 2, okay, and that's essentially the same thing. So how do you know when you're supposed to use the formula that has the R or the D? It depends on the information the problem gives you. If the problem gives you radius, use the formula for radius. If the problem gives you diameter, use the formula for diameter. That's about the simplest way I can explain it, okay? But that 2 is significant because if you multiply the radius by 2, it essentially is the same value as the diameter. All right, so how do you find, actually, let's talk about the semicircle. A semicircle is half of a circle. All right, you'll see that in example 3. All right, a semicircle is half of a circle. And then what are the formulas to find diameter and radius? Well, if you're trying to find diameter, you can multiply the radius times 2. If you're trying to find the radius, you can take the diameter and divide by 2. All right, so the formula actually makes that a little bit more complicated than what it really is, right? If you know the radius is 3, then you double it for the diameter. That's it. And that's what we're doing in example 1. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to example 1. If it gives me diameter, it's asking for radius. Okay, so we know, and you will get to the point, guys, where you can do this mental math. If it gives me diameter, I need to know radius. Radius equals the diameter divided by 2. So what's the diameter, guys? What's the diameter?
20.
What's 20 divided by 2?
10.
All right, something that you probably are going to be able to do mental math. Would you agree? Okay, but you need to understand, because this seems pretty straightforward, but then when we had last hour people working on homework, they were like kind of confused. Like, what am I doing here? If it says find the radius and it gives you diameter, you divide it by 2. All right, so what does it give me in the second circle? It gives me the radius. How do I know it's the radius? Because it's only half, okay? So that means I'm finding diameter, which equals 2 times the radius. So What's 2 times 7? Diameter is 14. All right, so once you kind of get that ingrained in your mind that, hey, the diameter is 2 times the radius, you could easily do that in your head. All right, so I'm not going to be real picky with you about showing the work on these. Okay, finding diameter and radius, you can just write the answer. All right, example 2 now, I'm going to find circumference. Okay, well, I need to use my formula, but I need to know, remember I gave you 2 formulas to find circumference. So given the first image, someone raise your hand and tell me which one of the 2 formulas would you choose? Which one of the 2? Would you choose the formula that had the R for radius, or would you choose the one D for diameter? Based on what it gives you here in this top circle. What does it give me in this top circle?
A radius.
It gives me the radius. Now, you say, well, I want to use the one with diameter. Well, could you figure out the diameter?
Yes.
And just plug it in for D. It doesn't matter, but because it gives me the radius, I'm just going to go with it, and I'm going to solve using the formula for circumference with radius. C equals 2 pi r. Now let's talk about pi for a minute. Look at the instructions. It's going to tell you this on your homework too. It says use 3.14 or 22/7 for pi. So how do I know if I need to use the decimal or the fraction? I'm going to tell you. It depends on the value that you're plugging in. If the value you're plugging in is a multiple of 7, all right, look here, guys. If it's a multiple of 7, using the fraction will cross-reduce it, okay? So ask yourself, okay, on this first one, is 5 a multiple of 7?
No.
Is it a multiple? No, it's not even 7. So because 5 is not a multiple of 7, I will use 3.14. C equals 2 times 3.14 times my radius. What was the radius for that circle? What was the radius, guys? Up there. Come on. 5. All right. Before you use your calculators, no calculator. Okay. Commutative property says I can multiply these in any order. What 2 numbers would be really easy to multiply? What's 2 times 5? 10. And any time I multiply something by a power of 10, what happens to my decimal? It moves to the right. If I multiply by 10, it moves to the right 1 place. So what's my answer? And there you go. You used no calculator. And you know that your answer is 31.4. Okay? Now, I'm not saying calculators are forbidden, okay, because you can use them on this test, but you actually didn't need them if you applied your number properties. Okay, all right, let's look at the next one, this watch, okay? So for the watch, does it give me the radius or the diameter?
Diameter.
It gives me diameter, so I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to use the formula for diameter. All right, but now I need to decide, it says pi d. I need to decide, do I want to use the decimal value or the fraction for pi? Why are some of you saying fraction? Because the diameter, and guess what? What's the radius?
28.
What's the radius if diameter is 28? 14. Doesn't matter which value you want to use, both of them are multiples of 7. Okay, so because it's a multiple of 7, you do want to use the fraction. It just comes out to a cleaner answer. So C equals 22/7 times the diameter, which is 28/1. And because the diameter was a multiple of 7, look what happens. 7 cancels, 28 cancels to make a 4. Now all of a sudden, I don't need my calculator again, because I can do 22 times 4. There's no carrying. So what's 2 times 4? And then 2 times 4 again. Just multiply each digit by 4. 22 times 4 is 88. C equals 88 millimeters. So what does that mean about the watch? That means that the distance around this watch is what? 88 millimeters. If I could wrap a tape measure around it, it's 88 millimeters. But the beauty of the formula is I didn't actually have to measure it. I used the formula to find the measurement, but I didn't actually measure it, and I know that it's accurate. It's actually kind of cool, right? So the formulas take out like the actual physical work of having to measure something. All right. How do we do on finding circumference? Okay. So for a I cannot stop coughing. For a semicircle, okay, the process is very similar. For a semicircle. All right, I need to find the perimeter, which is the distance around this semicircle. So the first question I have is which formula for circumference I need to use, the one with the D or the one with the R? What do you think? D. Why would you say D? Because it gives me diameter. 6 meters is the diameter, so I'm going to use C equals pi D. Okay? So basically what I'm doing here is I'm acting as if this is a circle. Okay? It's not. But by using C equals pi D, I can find the circumference as if it were the entire circle. Yes, exactly. C equals, because 6 is not a multiple of 7, 3.14 times 6. All right? So again, I'm finding the circumference as if it was an entire circle. And what would I get if I multiplied? You can use your calculators. That's okay.
18.84.
Yes, 18.84. But again, it's not an entire circle. Okay, so 18.84 is the entire circle. What do I need to do to find half of that? What do you think? Divide by 2. So if I divide by 2, okay, you've got to get this, okay? Dividing by 2 gives me 9.42. But that is only this part of the circle, okay, is the 9.42. So that's not the entire perimeter of the semicircle. I must then add in this last side. So that's why I add 6. Okay? Because remember, I'm finding the perimeter of only the semicircle. All right? So found the circumference and halved it to figure out what only half of the circumference would be. And then I added that last flat side. All right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and I found the perimeter of the semicircle. 15.42 meters. Okay, last example, example 4. Modeling in real life. Circumference of a roll of caution tape decreases 10.5 inches after a firefighter uses some. What is the radius of the roll after the firefighter uses the tape? Okay, so a couple things are happening here. Okay, so I'm dealing with circumference, so I need to figure out which circumference formula I want to use, but also, what am I solving for? Because I'm no longer solving for circumference. I'm solving for the radius, so that tells me which formula I want to use. C equals, which one? If I'm being asked to solve for radius, would I want to use the formula that has R in it? Yes. C equals 2 pi R. Okay? But I cannot plug in the value here for circumference because it said that the firefighter used some of it. So maybe it was 31.4 inches to start with, but that's not what was left. Look at the question. After the firefighter used it. So how could I figure out what value actually to plug in for C?
Minus 10. Minus 10 and a half.
Yes. You take the 31.4 and you have to minus what was used, minus the 10.5. Okay? What's 31.4 minus 10.5? 20.9. And now we just follow the process. Equals 2 times pi times r, which I don't know. So what do you think is next? Don't need your calculators. What do you think is next, guys? Yes, 2 times 3.14. If I'm doubling something, I'm taking the 2. What's 2 times 3? 6. And then what's 2 times 14? So it's 6.28. Okay? Now, if you didn't know that 2 times 14 was 28, you can simply do 2 times 1, which is 2, and 2 times 4, which is 8, and then you would have the 6.28 again. Okay? So you just take each place value and you would multiply it by that number. If you were multiplying by 3, you could do the same thing, but there is a little bit of carrying going on. Okay? All right, so 6.28R. Now, what do you think would be that last step? To divide. And just as a word of caution, sometimes when you divide in these scenarios, the number keeps just going and going. The directions will be specific, but we are going to round this just to the nearest tenth or even the 100th. About 3.3 repeating. Not repeating, but 3.3, and it keeps going. So we just estimate it. All right. The radius, half the distance across this caution tape roll, would be about 3 inches, roughly. All right. Questions? Questions? Okay. So that finishes up all the examples. I want to take the rest of class, which is a significant amount of time, to knock out the homework. I want you guys really working on these problems, asking questions. You will have some questions. All right, so we're going to take the rest of class to work on homework, and that's it for 9.1.